The year was 3047, and humanity had finally stepped out of the shadows of Earth. For centuries, humans have been confined to their home planet, watching as other civilizations explored the vastness of space. But now, after decades of technological advancement and relentless determination, they were part of something much bigger, the Intergalactic Union. This coalition brought together beings from thousands of star systems, each with its own culture, history, and ambitions. It was a place where diplomacy mattered more than weapons, at least in theory. Among the human representatives stood Dong-hyuk, a man whose calm demeanor masked a sharp mind and an even sharper tongue. He wasn't tall or imposing. Instead, he carried himself with quiet confidence that made others take notice. His dark hair was always neatly combed, and his suits were tailored perfectly, giving him an air of sophistication that many aliens found unsettling. They weren't used to humans being so polished, so deliberate. Yet, Dong-hyuk didn't care what they thought. All he cared about was protecting Earth's interests. By his side was Eun-ju, a young woman who served as both his assistant and his closest ally. She wasn't flashy like some of the alien diplomats' aides, nor did she have any extraordinary powers. What she did have, however, was an uncanny ability to read people. Whether it was spotting a lie in someone's tone or predicting how a negotiation might unfold, Eun-ju had a knack for understanding the unspoken. Dong-hyuk trusted her completely, often relying on her insights when things got complicated. Their days were filled with meetings, debates, and endless discussions about trade agreements, resource allocations, and territorial disputes. The Galactic Council, which governed the Intergalactic Union, met regularly in Celestial Spire, a towering structure orbiting a distant moon. Its walls shimmered with holographic displays, showing maps of star systems and live feeds from across the galaxy. It was a place of grandeur, but also of tension. Every species wanted something, and not everyone played fair. One particular morning began like any other. Dong-hyuk and Eun-ju arrived at the council chambers early, preparing for yet another session. As they walked through the corridors, surrounded by aliens of all shapes and sizes, they exchanged few words. There was no need. After years of working together, they could communicate with just a glance or a nod. Today's agenda included a dispute over mining rights in the Andromeda sector, a topic that usually bored everyone except the miners themselves. But there was also a growing rumor that the Zorathians, a militaristic race known for their arrogance, were planning to accuse humanity of espionage. The Zorathians were troublemakers. Their ships patrolled the edges of human-controlled space, testing boundaries and looking for excuses to escalate conflicts. They saw humans as weak, unworthy of their newfound status among the stars. Kaeldar, their ambassador to the council, was particularly hostile, tall and broad-shouldered, with skin that gleamed like polished metal. He commanded attention wherever he went. His voice boomed during debates, drowning out quieter voices and intimidating those who dared oppose him. Dong-hyuk knew better than to underestimate him. As the council convened, the room buzzed with anticipation. Delegates took their seats, adjusting their robes or straightening their antennae. Holograms flickered to life above the central table, displaying data streams and diplomatic notes. When the session began, the chairperson, a wise old being named Lyrvex, called for order. "Let's address the matter of Andromeda first," he said, his voice calm but firm. For a while, everything proceeded as expected. Boring speeches about mineral quotas and environmental protections dragged on. Then, without warning, Kaeldar rose from his seat. His metallic eyes scanned the room before locking on to Dong-hyuk. "Before we move forward," he declared, his voice cutting through the monotony, "I must bring up a serious concern. Evidence has come to light suggesting that humanity is engaging in covert operations against the Zorathian fleet." A murmur rippled through the chamber. Some delegates leaned forward, intrigued by the accusation. Others rolled their eyes, knowing full well that Kaeldar loved drama. Dong-hyuk remained still, his expression unreadable. Beside him, Eun-ju tensed, gripping the edge of her tablet. "Evidence?" Dong-hyuk asked, his voice smooth and steady. "Or mere speculation?" Kaeldar sneered. "Do not insult our intelligence. Human. We have intercepted communications, traced back to your vessels. You think we are blind to your schemes." Dong Hyuk tilted his head slightly, as if considering the claim. If you have evidence, present it. Otherwise, these baseless accusations serve only to waste our time. The room fell silent. Everyone waited to see how Quel'Thar would respond. Instead of answering, he turned to the other delegates. Is this the behavior we tolerate? Humans, hiding behind lies and deceit, pretend to be equals when they are nothing but children playing at politics. Some species nodded in agreement, while others looked uncomfortable. Humanity's position within the Union was still fragile, and such accusations could easily sway public opinion. Unju glanced at Dong Hyuk, searching for a sign of panic. But there was none. His smile remained intact, though it seemed colder now, like frost creeping across glass. When it was his turn to speak, Dong Hyuk stood gracefully. Ambassador Quel'Thar speaks loudly, as usual, but offers little substance. I challenge him to provide proof or admit that his words are empty threats designed to distract us from real issues. The chamber erupted into arguments. Voices clashed, tempers flared, and alliances shifted. Through it all, Dong Hyuk maintained a composure, deflecting insults and countering accusations with ease. Even Unju marveled at his skill. He was like a dancer, moving effortlessly through the chaos, never losing balance. But then, something unexpected happened. In the heat of the moment, Quel'Thar lunged forward, striking Dong Hyuk across the face. The blow landed with a sickening crack, sending shockwaves through the room. For a brief moment, time seemed to stop. No one moved. No one spoke. The rules of diplomacy had been shattered. Dong Hyuk staggered slightly, but quickly regained his footing. Blood trickled from the corner of his mouth, but he wiped it away with the back of his hand. His smile returned wider and sharper than before. To the casual observer, it might have seemed like a gesture of defiance. But Unju saw something else in his eyes, something dark and dangerous. "What will you do now?" she whispered as they exited the chamber later that day. "This changes everything." Dong Hyuk didn't answer immediately. He stared out at the stars, his jaw clenched. Finally, he spoke, his voice low and chilling. "Sometimes death wears a smile." Unju shivered, unsure whether to feel fear or admiration. Whatever Dong Hyuk had planned, one thing was certain. The galaxy would never forget this day. The strike had sent shockwaves through the Galactic Council, but its true impact rippled far beyond the chamber walls. News of Quel'Thar's violent outburst spread quickly across the intergalactic union. For many, it was confirmation of what they already suspected. The Zorathians were bullies who thrived on intimidation. Yet for others, it was proof that humanity didn't belong in the council, that Earth's representatives were too inexperienced to handle such high-stakes diplomacy. Back aboard the Solstice, humanity's flagship station near the Celestial Spire, Dong Hyuk retreated to his quarters. The room was small and sparsely decorated, with only a desk, a bed, and a viewport overlooking the endless expanse of stars. He sat at the desk, staring at his reflection in the polished surface. A faint bruise was forming along his jawline, where Quel'Thar's fist had connected. It wasn't the pain that bothered him. It barely registered. But the humiliation. Not personal humiliation, though. He cared little for pride. What gnawed at him was the insult to humanity itself. Every species watching would see this as weakness, as evidence that humans couldn't hold their ground among the stars. Unju knocked softly before entering. She carried a medical kit, her hand steady despite the tension radiating from her body. "Let me clean that up," she said, gesturing toward his face. Dong Hyuk nodded but didn't speak. As she dabbed at the cut with antiseptic, Unju studied him carefully. His smile, the one he wore so often, was gone now, replaced by an expression she couldn't quite decipher. It wasn't anger, not exactly. It was something colder, more calculated. "Sir," she began hesitantly, "what happens next? The council will side with the Zorathians. You know that." Dong Hyuk leaned back in his chair, closing his eyes for a moment. When he opened them again, they gleamed with a resolve that made Unju uneasy. "They can side with whoever they want," he said quietly. "But this isn't over. Not even close." She set the medical supplies aside and crossed her arms. "What do you mean?" For a long time, Dong Hyuk didn't answer. Instead, He rose from his seat and walked to the viewport, gazing out at the stars. Finally, he spoke. "You've been loyal to me, Unju, but loyalty requires trust. Do you trust me?" "Of course," she replied without hesitation. "But I don't understand." He turned to face her, his expression softening just slightly. "Then listen carefully. What happened today wasn't just an attack on me or on Earth. It was an attack on everything we stand for. If we let this go unanswered, if we bow our heads and accept their judgment, we'll never earn respect in this union. We'll always be seen as weak, as inferior." Unju frowned. "So, what are you saying? That we fight back? How?" Dong Hyuk moved to the far corner of the room, opening a hidden panel in the wall. Inside was a sleek device no larger than a tablet. Its screen glowed faintly as he activated it, revealing lines of code scrolling across the display. "This is Project Hanbai," he explained. "It's been years in the making, a contingency plan for situations like this." Unju stepped closer, peering at the device. "What does it do?" "It turns the Zorathians' own technology against them," Dong Hyuk said, his voice dropping to a whisper. "They're military. Networks rely on interconnected systems. If we can infiltrate those systems, we can disrupt their entire operation. Communication grids, weapon systems, supply chains, all of it vulnerable." Her eyes widened. "That's ambitious and dangerous." "It's necessary," he countered sharply. "We can't win a war outright, not yet. But we can weaken them enough to force change. Once their empire starts crumbling, other species will turn against them. They'll see the truth about the Zorathians, their greed, their cruelty." Unju shook her head, struggling to process what she was hearing. "And what about the Council? Won't they retaliate when they find out?" "They won't," Dong Hyuk said confidently, "because they'll never know it was us. By the time anyone realizes what's happening, it'll be too late to stop it. Trust me, Unju, this is the only way." She wanted to argue, to tell him there had to be another path. But deep down, she knew he was right. Humanity couldn't afford to play by the rules anymore, not when those rules were rigged against them. Still, the weight of what he was proposing felt overwhelming. "Okay," she said finally, "I'm with you. But how do we get access to their systems? The security protocols alone would take months to bypass." Dong Hyuk smiled faintly, the first hint of warmth returning to his face. "That's why we're going to use the Council's own hub during the Unity Summit." "The summit?" Unju repeated, incredulous. "That's impossible. Security will be tighter than ever." "Not impossible," he corrected. "Difficult, yes, but not impossible. With your help and a bit of luck, we can pull it off." Over the next few days, they worked tirelessly to prepare. Dong Hyuk spent hours refining Project Hanbai, testing every line of code to ensure it functioned flawlessly. Meanwhile, Unju gathered intelligence on the Council security measures, poring over blueprints and surveillance footage. Together, they crafted a plan so intricate it bordered on madness. Disguising themselves as maintenance workers, they would infiltrate the Celestial Spire during the summit, upload Hanbai into the central network, and escape before anyone realized what happened. As the day of the summit approached, nerves began to fray. Unju found herself lying awake at night, replaying every possible scenario in her mind. What if they were caught? What if something went wrong? Each question gnawed at her resolve, threatening to unravel the fragile confidence she'd built. But whenever doubt crept in, she reminded herself of Dong Hyuk's words. Sometimes, death wears a smile. On the morning of a Unity summit, the Solstice docked at the orbital platform surrounding the Celestial Spire. Delegates from across the galaxy streamed into the building, their colorful robes and shimmering armor creating a kaleidoscope of sights. Among them, disguised in plain gray uniforms, were Dong Hyuk and Unju. Their fake identifications listed them as technicians assigned to monitor the ventilation systems. It was a cover flimsy enough to raise suspicion if scrutinized closely, but no one paid much attention to maintenance staff. Inside the spire, chaos reigned. The summit brought together leaders from dozens of worlds, each vying for attention and influence. Holographic displays flickered above crowded tables, showing live updates from various sectors of the galaxy. Servers bustled between delegates, offering drinks and snacks. Amid the noise and activity, Dong-hyuk and Eun-ju slipped unnoticed into the service corridors, sticking to the shadows. Their destination was a central server room, located deep within the spire's core. Getting there required navigating a labyrinth of locked doors and guarded checkpoints. At one point, they narrowly avoided detection when patrol passed within inches of their hiding spot. Eun-ju held her breath, her heart pounding in her chest. Beside her, Dong-hyuk remained eerily calm, his focus unshakable. Finally, after what felt like hours, they reached the server room. The door slid open with a soft hiss, revealing rows of humming machines and glowing panels. Dong-hyuk wasted no time, connecting his device to the main terminal. Lines of code scrolled rapidly across the screen as Hanbai began its work. Eun-ju kept watch, her eyes darting toward the entrance every few seconds. Then disaster struck. Footsteps echoed in the corridor outside, growing louder with each passing second. Someone was coming. Eun-ju tapped Dong-hyuk's shoulder urgently. "We have to go. Now." "Not yet," he muttered, his fingers flying across the keyboard. "Almost done." The footsteps stopped just outside the door. Panic surged through Eun-ju's veins. She grabbed a wrench from a nearby toolbox, ready to defend them if necessary. The door slid open, revealing a figure silhouetted against the light. It was Vera, a bounty hunter infamous for her ruthlessness. Her sharp features and piercing gaze made her instantly recognizable. In one hand, she held an energy blade, its faint hum filling the air. Without a word, she stepped inside, her eyes locking onto Dong-hyuk and Eun-ju. Dong-hyuk glanced up briefly, then returned his focus to the screen. "Eun-ju," he said calmly, "buy me 10 seconds." Before she could respond, Vera lunged. Eun-ju swung the wrench wildly, deflecting the blade just in time. Sparks flew as metal clashed against metal. Vera moved with terrifying speed, pressing her advantage relentlessly. Eun-ju fought back with desperation, using whatever tools she could grab to keep the bounty hunter at bay. Behind her, Dong-hyuk finished uploading Hanbai. With a final keystroke, he triggered the program. A low hum filled the room as the virus spread to the Council's network. Satisfied, he stood and pulled a plasma pistol from his belt. Without hesitation, he fired, not at Vera, but at the ceiling above her. The blast shattered support beams, sending chunks of debris crashing down. "Move!" Dong-hyuk shouted, grabbing Eun-ju's arm and pulling her toward the exit. They sprinted to the collapsing hallway, dodging falling rubble and clouds of dust. Behind them, Vera cursed loudly, trapped beneath the wreckage. When they emerged into the open air, the summit was in disarray. Alarms blared, and delegates scrambled in confusion as their systems failed. Through it all, Dong-hyuk and Eun-ju disappeared into crowd, blending seamlessly with the chaos. As they boarded a transport shuttle bound for the solstice, Eun-ju looked at Dong-hyuk, her chest heaving with exertion. "Is it done?" He nodded, a faint smile playing on his lips. "It's done. The Zarathians will never see it coming." The shuttle ride back to the solstice was tense but quiet. Dong-hyuk and Eun-ju sat side by side, their breathing still heavy from the adrenaline rush of their escape. Neither spoke as they stared out at the vast expanse of space, stretching endlessly beyond the windows. The silence between them wasn't uncomfortable. It was a shared understanding that words weren't needed yet. They had done what they came to do, but the real consequences were only beginning. Once aboard the solstice, Dong-hyuk immediately retreated to his private quarters. He locked the door behind him and slumped into his chair, letting out a long sigh. For the first time since the mission began, he allowed himself a moment of vulnerability. His hands trembled slightly as he rubbed his temples, the weight of what he'd set in motion pressing down on him like gravity on a dying star. Project Hanbai was live now, spreading through the Zarathian networks like wildfire. There was no turning back. Eun-ju, meanwhile, stood outside his door for a moment before walking away. She knew better than to disturb him when he needed space. Instead, she went to the ship's observation deck, where she could watch the celestial spire shrink into the distance as the solstice moved further away. Her mind raced with questions, some about the future, others about Dong Hyuk himself. What kind of man planned something so bold, so dangerous? And why did he trust her enough to bring her along? Hours passed before Dong Hyuk emerged from his quarters. When he finally did, he looked more composed, though there was still a shadow in his eyes. He found Eun-ju in the observation deck, gazing out at the stars. Without saying a word, he joined her, standing silently beside her for several minutes. "You must have questions," he said eventually, his voice soft but steady. Eun-ju turned to look at him. "More than you can imagine. But I'll start with one. Why me? Why involve me in all this?" Dong Hyuk hesitated before answering. "Because you're smart, resourceful, and loyal. Because I trust you. And because you remind me of someone." "Who?" she asked, curiosity piqued. He shook his head. "That's not important right now. What matters is finishing what we've started." She nodded slowly, accepting his answer. "For now. What happens next? Once the Zorathians realize what's happening, they'll come after us." "They will," he agreed. "But by then it won't matter. Their systems are already compromised. By the time they trace the source back to us, Earth will be ready." "Ready for what?" Eun-ju pressed. "War." "No," Dong Hyuk replied firmly. "Not war. Independence. Respect. Humanity has spent too long begging for scraps at the galactic table. It's time we take our place, not as beggars, but as equals." His words resonated with her, but they also raised new concerns. "And if it doesn't work? If everything falls apart? Then we deal with that when it comes," he said, simply, "but I believe in this plan. I believe in us." For a while, neither of them spoke. They just stood there, watching the stars twinkle in the cold emptiness of space. Eventually, Dong Hyuk broke the silence. "There's something else you should know," he said, his tone shifting to something darker, heavier. Eun-ju frowned. "What is it?" He took a deep breath before continuing. "This isn't just about humanity or Earth. This is personal for me." She studied his face, searching for clues. "Personal how?" "My family," he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "Years ago, during one of the Zorathian raids on Earth, they were killed. The Council dismissed it as collateral damage. No apologies, no reparations. Just another tragedy swept under the rug." Eun-ju felt a pang of sympathy, but also unease. "Is that why you're doing this? Revenge?" "It's not revenge," he insisted, though his clenched fist betrayed his emotions. "It's justice. The Zorathians think they're untouchable, that their power gives them the right to destroy lives without consequence. I'm showing them otherwise." She didn't respond right away. Instead, she processed what he'd told her, piecing together the puzzle of who Dong Hyuk really was. Beneath his polished exterior lay a man driven by loss and anger, channeling those feelings into something bigger than himself. Whether that made him admirable or reckless, she couldn't decide. As the hours turned into days, the effects of Project Hanbai began to ripple across the galaxy. Reports started pouring in from various sectors. Zorathian supply chains disrupted, military fleets stranded without communication, entire colonies cut off from central command. At first, the Zorathians tried to cover it up, blaming technical malfunctions or sabotage by rival factions. But as the chaos escalated, their lives became harder to maintain. Back on the solstice, Dong Hyuk monitored the situation closely, tracking every update with a mix of satisfaction and grim determination. Eun-ju stayed by his side, helping him analyze data and strategize their next moves. Together, they watched as cracks began to form in the once unshakable Zorathian Empire. Internal dissent grew louder, with subjugated species rising up against their oppressors. Even some of the council members who had previously supported the Zorathians started distancing themselves, fearing association with a crumbling regime. Despite these victories, Dong Hyuk remained cautious. "We're not done yet," he reminded Eun-ju repeatedly. "The Zorathians won't go down without a fight. We need to stay ahead of them." One evening, as they reviewed intelligence reports, an urgent message came through from Earth Command. The transmission showed General Min-soo, a stern-faced officer known for his no-nonsense approach. "Ambassador Dong Hyuk," he began, his tone formal but tinged with urgency. We received word that the Zorathians are mobilizing a fleet near the Orion Belt. Intelligence suggests they're planning a full-scale assault on human territories. Dong Hyuk's expression darkened. They're desperate, he muttered, trying to regain control by force. What do we do? Eun-ju asked, her voice tight with worry. We prepare, he said firmly. Min-su, I want every available ship redirected to defensive positions. Reinforce key colonies and establish early warning systems. If the Zorathians attack, we hit them hard, and we hit them fast. General Min-su nodded. Understood. Earth stands with you, Ambassador. Whatever happens next, we're counting on you to lead us. After the transmission ended, Eun-ju turned to Dong Hyuk. Do you think we can win? He met her gaze, his eyes burning with resolve. We don't have a choice. Failure isn't an option. Over the following days, preparations intensified. The solstice served as both a command center and a rallying point for human forces scattered throughout nearby sectors. Messages flew back and forth between ships, coordinating movements and strategies. Morale among the crew was high, fueled by a sense of purpose and the knowledge that they were fighting for something greater than themselves. Amid the flurry of activity, Dong Hyuk found moments of solitude whenever he could. He often returned to the observation deck, staring out at the stars as if seeking guidance from the void. Eun-ju sometimes joined him, offering silent support when words failed. During one such moment, she broke the silence. Do you ever wonder what peace would look like? She asked softly. A galaxy where species coexist without fear or hatred. Dong Hyuk smiled faintly. I used to dream about it. Now I focus on survival. Peace is a luxury we can't afford until we're strong enough to defend it. Her heart ached at his response, but she understood. In a universe ruled by power and fear, ideals like peace seemed distant, almost naive. Yet, deep down, she hoped that one day humanity could help build a better future, not just for themselves, but for everyone. As the Zorathian fleet drew closer, tension aboard the Solstice reached a fever pitch. Every crew member knew the stakes. Victory meant freedom. Defeat meant annihilation. Dong Hyuk addressed the crew over the intercom, his voice steady and commanding. This is our moment, he declared. The Zorathians think they can crush us, but they underestimate who we are and what we're capable of. Today, we prove them wrong. Today, we show the galaxy that humanity is here to stay. Cheers erupted throughout the ship, echoing through corridors and filling the air with renewed determination. Eun-ju watched Dong Hyuk as he finished his speech, seeing not just a diplomat or strategist, but a leader willing to risk everything for his people. For the first time, she truly believed they might succeed. When the battle finally came, it was fierce and chaotic. Explosions lit up the darkness of space as human ships clashed with Zorathian vessels. Lasers streaked across the void, leaving trails of fire and debris in their wake. Despite being outnumbered, humanity fought with unmatched ferocity, driven by hope and desperation alike. From a bridge of the solstice, Dong Hyuk coordinated attacks, his mind working faster than ever before. Beside him, Eun-ju relayed orders and analyzed enemy movements, her calm efficiency masking the storm of emotions within her. Together, they became a force to be reckoned with, turning the tide of the battle inch by bloody inch. By the time the dust settled, the Zorathian fleet had been decimated. Survivors fled into the far reaches of space, abandoning their mission and leaving behind a shattered empire. Humanity emerged victorious, battered but unbroken. As news of the triumph spread, celebrations erupted across Earth and its colonies. For the first time in history, humanity stood tall among the stars, earning respect through strength and courage. But for Dong Hyuk, the victory felt bittersweet. He had achieved his goal, but at what cost? Standing on the observation deck once more, he gazed out at the wreckage floating silently in the void. Eun-ju joined him, placing a hand on his shoulder. You did it, she said softly. You changed everything. He nodded, his smile faint but genuine. Yes, but the fight isn't over. Not yet. The aftermath of the battle left a strange silence in its wake. The solstice drifted quietly through space, surrounded by the wreckage of Zorathian ships and the faint glow of dying stars. For days, the crew worked tirelessly to repair damage, tend to the wounded, and assess the losses. Despite their victory, there was no celebration aboard the ship, only a somber acknowledgement of what had been sacrificed. Dong Hyuk spent most of his time alone, retreating to his quarters or pacing the observation deck. He rarely spoke unless necessary, his usual calm demeanor replaced by a quiet intensity that made others uneasy. Eun-ju noticed a change but didn't push him. She understood that he carried the weight of everything that had happened. The lives lost, the risks taken, the secrets kept. Still, she worried about him. The man who had once smiled so easily now seemed haunted, as if the cost of victory was etched into his soul. One evening, as the rest of the crew rested, Eun-ju found him standing at the viewport, staring out at the endless expanse of space. His hands were clasped behind his back, his posture rigid. She approached cautiously, unsure if he wanted company. When she finally spoke, her voice was soft. "Are you okay?" He didn't turn to look at her. "Does it matter?" he asked, his tone flat. "We won, didn't we? Isn't that what everyone wanted?" "It matters," she replied firmly. "You've done more for humanity than anyone could have imagined, but you can't keep carrying this alone." For a moment, he said nothing. Then, with a heavy sigh, he turned to face her. His eyes were tired, shadowed by sleepless nights and countless burdens. "Do you think they'll remember us, Eun-ju? Do you think history will care about the choices we made?" She hesitated before answering. "I think they'll remember that we stood up when no one else would. That's enough, isn't it?" He gave a faint smile, though it didn't reach his eyes. "Maybe, or maybe they'll just see us as monsters. After all, we started this war. We brought destruction to the Zorathians' doorstep. We didn't start anything," Eun-ju countered sharply. "They attacked us first, years ago, when they killed your family. And they kept attacking, over and over, until someone finally fought back. You gave humanity a chance to survive." Her words hung in the air between them, raw and honest. Dong Hyuk looked away, unable to meet her gaze. "Survival isn't the same as living," he murmured. "What happens now? How do we rebuild after all this?" "That's the next step," she said gently. "We take what we've earned and use it to build something better, something stronger." Her optimism struck a chord within him, though he wasn't ready to let go of his doubts. Instead, he nodded slowly. "Let's hope you're right." In the weeks that followed, the galaxy began to feel the full impact of the Zorathian collapse. Their empire, once vast and unshakable, crumbled under the strain of internal rebellion and external pressure. Colonies rose up against their oppressors, demanding freedom and justice. Other species, emboldened by humanity's success, began to question the authority of the Galactic Council. The balance of power shifted dramatically, creating both opportunities and challenges for Earth. Back on the solstice, Dong Hyuk focused on consolidating their gains. He worked closely with Earth Command to establish new alliances and secure resources needed for reconstruction. Eun-ju assisted him, her sharp instincts proving invaluable in navigating the complex web of interstellar politics. Together, they drafted proposals for reforms within the Council, advocating for greater transparency and accountability. Despite these efforts, tensions remained high. Many species still viewed humanity with suspicion, wary of their newfound strength. Some even accused them of being too aggressive, too ambitious. Rumors spread about Project Hanbai, though no concrete evidence linked it to Earth. Kaeldar, the Zorathian ambassador, disappeared shortly after battle, leaving behind only whispers of his fate. Some claimed he had fled into exile. Others believed he perished in the chaos. Amid the uncertainty, one thing became clear. Humanity's position in the galaxy had changed forever. No longer seen as weak or insignificant, they were now a force to be reckoned with, a species capable of standing toe-to-toe with the most powerful empires. Yet, with this newfound respect came responsibility. The decisions made in the coming months would shape not just Earth's future, but the future of the entire Union. The Unity Summit reconvened unexpectedly, called by Lyrvex, the chairperson of the Galactic Council. Delegates from across the galaxy gathered once again in the Celestial Spire, their faces reflecting a mix of fear, anger, and curiosity. The agenda was simple yet monumental: to address the fallout of the Zorathian collapse and determine the path forward for the Intergalactic Union. Dong-hyuk and Eun-ju arrived early, dressed in formal attire that matched the gravity of the occasion. As they entered the chamber, they were met with a mixture of stares, some hostile, some curious, and a few almost respectful. Kael'dar's absence loomed large, his seat conspicuously empty. It was a stark reminder of how quickly fortunes could change in the galaxy. When the session began, Lyervex called for order, his voice calm but firm. "We stand at a crossroads," he declared. "The events of recent weeks have shaken the foundation of our union. If we are to move forward, we must do so together, with honesty, with courage, and with purpose." One by one, delegates took turns speaking, voicing their concerns and proposing solutions. Some argued for stricter regulations on military technology, while others called for investigations into alleged acts of sabotage. Through it all, Dong-hyuk listened intently, his expression unreadable. When it was his turn to speak, he rose gracefully, drawing the attention of every being in the room. "For centuries," he began, his voice steady and clear, "humanity has struggled to find its place among the stars. We have faced prejudice, violence, and betrayal, not because of who we are, but because of fear. Fear of the unknown, fear of change. Today, I ask you to set aside that fear and embrace a new vision for our union, one built on trust, equality, and mutual respect." His words resonated deeply, earning nods of agreement from several delegates. Even those who had doubted humanity couldn't deny the sincerity in his voice. As he continued, outlining specific reforms and initiatives, Eun-ju watched proudly from the sidelines. This was the man she had come to admire, not the calculating strategist, but the visionary leader willing to fight for a better future. By the end of the summit, significant progress had been made. New trade agreements were forged, resource allocations were adjusted, and plans were set in motion to hold the Council accountable for its actions. Humanity emerged not just as survivors, but as architects of change. As the solstice prepared to depart from the orbital platform, Eun-ju joined Dong-hyuk on the observation deck one last time. The celestial spire gleamed in the distance, its towers bathed in the light of a nearby star. For a moment, neither of them spoke, content to simply watch as the galaxy continued spinning around them. "You did it," Eun-ju said eventually, breaking the silence. "You changed everything." Dong-hyuk shook his head slightly. "Not me. Us. None of this would have been possible without you." She smiled, touched by his words. "Where do we go from here?" He glanced at her, his expression thoughtful. "Home. Earth needs leaders now more than ever. People who understand what's at stake and are willing to guide us forward." "And you?" she asked. "What will you do?" He hesitated, as if weighing his answer carefully. "I don't know yet. Maybe it's time for someone else to take the reins, to lead humanity into the future." Eun-ju frowned, sensing the finality in his tone. "You're leaving, aren't you?" "Perhaps," he admitted. "There's still work to be done. Old wounds to heal, new battles to fight. But not here. Not anymore." Though sadness tugged at her heart, she forced herself to smile. "Then I'll make sure Earth is ready for whatever comes next." He nodded, gratitude shining in his eyes. "Thank you, Eun-ju, for everything." As the solstice launched into hyperspace, heading back toward Earth, Dong-hyuk retreated to his quarters for the last time. He packed lightly, taking only what he needed. Before closing his bag, he paused to examine a small photograph tucked inside. A picture of his family, smiling and happy, frozen in a moment long past. For the first time in years, he allowed himself to grieve openly, tears streaming down his face as memories flooded back. When he emerged hours later, his composure was restored. He handed Eun-ju a data chip containing detailed instructions for continuing his work. "This is for you," he said simply. "Everything you need to know is here." She accepted it solemnly, knowing it marked the end of an era. "Will I see you again?" He smiled faintly, his eyes twinkling with mischief. Sometimes death wears a smile. With that cryptic remark, he stepped onto the shuttle bound for parts unknown, disappearing into the vastness of space. Eun-ju watched until the shuttle vanished from sight, feeling both proud and bereft. Whatever lay ahead, she knew one thing for certain. Dong Hyuk's legacy would endure, shaping humanity's destiny for generations to come. Months passed since Dong Hyuk's departure, and Earth began to transform under the guidance of its new leaders. The Intergalactic Union, shaken by the collapse of the Zorathian Empire, slowly adapted to the shifting balance of power. Humanity's role in the galaxy had grown stronger, earning both respect and scrutiny from other species. Unju found herself at the center of this change, carrying the weight of Dong Hyuk's vision while forging her own path. She worked tirelessly alongside Earth Command, implementing reforms and negotiating alliances. Her sharp instincts and ability to read people made her an invaluable asset during tense discussions. Yet, despite her growing influence, she often thought about Dong Hyuk, his cryptic farewell. Sometimes, death wears a smile, lingered in her mind like a puzzle missing its final piece. Where had he gone? What battles did he still fight? And why had he chosen to leave when his work was far from done? Unju tried not to dwell on these questions too much. Instead, she focused on the present, determined to honor his legacy by building a better future for humanity. Under her leadership, Earth became a beacon of hope, a planet committed to peace, innovation, and cooperation. Trade routes reopened, bringing prosperity to colonies once isolated by conflict. Schools and research facilities flourished, producing scientists, engineers, and diplomats eager to contribute to the Union. But even as progress unfolded, shadows remained. Rumors circulated about rogue factions within the remnants of the Zorathian Empire, vowing revenge against humanity. Some claimed that Kaeldar himself had survived, rallying loyalists to rebuild what had been lost. These whispers kept Unju vigilant, knowing that peace was fragile and enemies could rise again without warning. One day, while reviewing intelligence reports aboard the Solstice, she received an unexpected message. It came through encrypted channels, marked with no sender identification. Curious, she opened it, her heart skipping a beat when she saw the contents. A single line of text appeared on the screen. Trust the stars. Unju stared at the words, her mind racing. Was it a trap? A coded message? Or something else entirely? She showed it to her closest advisors, but none could decipher its meaning. Reluctantly, she decided to investigate further, dispatching reconnaissance teams to scan nearby sectors for unusual activity. Days turned into weeks, and just as she began to dismiss the message as a prank, another transmission arrived. This time, it included coordinates deep within uncharted space. The location was remote, far beyond any known trade routes or inhabited systems. Suspicion gnawed at her, but so did curiosity. Against her better judgment, she ordered the Solstice to set course for the coordinates, accompanied by a small escort fleet. As they approached their destination, sensors detected a lone vessel drifting silently in the void. Its design was unfamiliar, sleek and angular, unlike anything Unju had seen before. When hailed, the ship responded with a single word, "Welcome." Her pulse quickened as she prepared to board the mysterious craft. Armed guards accompanied her, ready for anything. Inside, the interior was dimly lit, filled with strange symbols etched into the walls. At the center of the main chamber stood a figure cloaked in shadow, their face obscured by a hood. "Who are you?" Unju demanded, her voice steady despite the unease creeping up her spine. The figure lowered their hood, revealing weathered features and piercing eyes. For a moment, she didn't recognize him. Then, as realization dawned, her breath caught in her throat. "Dong Hyuk," she whispered, disbelief coloring her tone. He smiled faintly, though there was little warmth in it. "Hello, Unju. What are you doing here?" she asked, struggling to process his sudden reappearance. "Why did you leave?" "I left because my work wasn't finished," he replied simply, "and because someone needed to clean up the mess we started." Her frown deepened. "What mess?" "We ended the Zorathians' reign of terror. We gave oppressed species a chance to rise up. Isn't that enough?" "No," he said sharply. "It's never enough. The Zorathians may be gone, but their ideology lives on, in their survivors, in their allies, in the fear they spread across the galaxy. If we don't root out completely, history will repeat itself." Unju shook her head, frustration bubbling to the surface. "You can't keep fighting forever. At some point, you have to let go. I wish I could, he admitted, his voice softening. But letting go means risking everything we built. I won't allow that to happen. Before she could respond, alarms blared throughout the ship. Sensors detected multiple vessels emerging from hyperspace, surrounding them in moments. Through the viewport, Unju recognized the distinct shapes of Zarathian cruisers, larger and more advanced than any she'd seen before. They found us, she breathed, panic rising in her chest. Dong Hyuk nodded grimly. This is why I'm here. To finish what we started. Without waiting for her reply, he moved to the control panel, his fingers flying over the keys. The ship hummed to life, its engines roaring as it prepared for battle. Unju followed close behind, torn between admiration and exasperation. You're insane, she muttered. We're outnumbered. Not for long, he countered, activating a hidden system. Suddenly, dozens of smaller ships decloaked around them, forming a protective perimeter. Each bore the insignia of rebel factions, species once oppressed by the Zarathians, now united under a common cause. Unju stared in awe. How did you? I've spent months gathering allies, he explained. Building trust, sharing resources, planning strategies. This isn't just our fight anymore. It belongs to everyone who suffered under tyranny. As the battle erupted, chaos engulfed the sector. Lasers streaked through space, explosions lighting up the darkness like fireworks. The Solstice joined the fray, its crew working seamlessly to support the rebel fleet. From the bridge, Unju coordinated attacks, her sharp instincts guiding their efforts. Beside her, Dong Hyuk manned the controls, his focus unwavering. Despite being outnumbered, the rebels fought with unmatched determination. Their ships darted through enemy formations, exploiting weaknesses and sowing confusion. Slowly but surely, the tide began to turn. Zarathian cruisers faltered, their crews overwhelmed by relentless assaults. In the midst of the chaos, Unju caught glimpses of Dong Hyuk's expression. Gone was the cold strategist she had come to know. In his place stood a man driven by purpose, by conviction. Whatever doubts she had harbored about his methods melted away as she watched him lead, not with words, but with action. When the dust settled, the Zarathian fleet lay in ruins, its remaining ships retreating into the void. Cheers erupted throughout the rebel fleet, echoing across communication channels. For the first time in years, true victory felt within reach. As the celebrations began, Dong Hyuk turned to Unju, his smile faint but genuine. It's over, he said softly. For now. She nodded, exhaustion and relief washing over her. What happens next? That's up to you, he replied. Earth needs a leader who believes in unity, not vengeance. Someone who can guide humanity toward a brighter future. And you? She asked, fearing the answer. He hesitated before speaking. My journey ends here. There's nothing left for me to do. Tears welled in her eyes as she realized what he meant. Don't say that. You've given everything, for us, for the galaxy. Stay. Help us rebuild. He shook his head gently. I've played my part. Now it's your turn to carry the torch. With those final words, he stepped onto a shuttle bound for parts unknown. As it disappeared into the stars, Unju watched silently, her heart heavy with gratitude and grief. Though he was gone, his presence lingered. In the lessons he taught, the sacrifices he made, and the hope he inspired. Back on Earth, Unju took her place as humanity's representative in the Galactic Council. She carried Dong Hyuk's vision forward, advocating for reforms that prioritize equality and cooperation. Over time, the scars of war faded, replaced by a sense of unity among the stars. Yet, whenever she gazed at the night sky, she couldn't help but wonder where he had gone, and whether, somewhere out there, he still wore that enigmatic smile.